Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Olson. I'm the librarian for Political Science 391. I'll be working with you this semester. And this is the first of a few videos that you'll be watching and working through some things. So let's get started. Again, I'm Rachel Olson. I work with several different departments on campus, including political science, and you can see there my email, as well as a link that you can use to make a virtual appointment with me if you need some one-on-one assistance. So we're going to spend a good amount of time in this course related to information literacy, which has to do with thinking about the ways in which we find and use and evaluate and create information, and also give credit to information. So we're going to distinguish between academic and popular sources. We're going to think about how to communicate information based on specific needs and purposes, lots of different things here. And you don't need to memorize these or anything. This is just sort of for you to know. We have some outcomes in this course that we try to achieve with information literacy. So, like I said, we're going to talk about search terms. We're going to think about revising search strategies based on the results that you're getting. We're going to look at scholarly conversations in the field of political science. We're going to identify different source formats, so being able to tell the difference between different types of sources. And we're also going to think about credibility and evaluating sources based on whether or not we think a source is reliable, things like that. So when you're thinking about formulating a research question, there are a few things to keep in mind. A good research question should definitely be something you're interested in. You're going to be spending a little bit of time with this question. So make it something that you care about at least somewhat. It should obviously be in line with any instructions that you've been given. Dr. Broche has posted a research paper project assignment guidelines document, so you definitely want to pay attention to that. Your topic should be manageable, so don't make it too broad and don't make it too narrow. So for example, you wouldn't want to say, I'm going to do a 10-page paper all about climate change. That's a little bit too broad, but something that's too narrow might be, I want to look at the impact of climate change on buildings at UNC Greensboro. That's too narrow. I want to try to land somewhere in between the two. And obviously it should be original. We don't want to copy other people, but obviously feel free to cite other people if their work has been helpful to you as a researcher. That's very important. These are a couple examples of question types in political science. This definitely is not an exhaustive list. These aren't all the types of questions that we might ask. I just sort of like this chart, and I can show you it comes from this guide, which can kind of walk you through the different types of questions that you might be interested in. So are you thinking about analytical questions? Are you thinking about explaining something? So like an explanatory question, things that can that have a relatively, not an easy answer, but a relatively definable answer. Are you thinking about a descriptive answer? Are you thinking about a policy answer? So potential solutions. Are you thinking about political theory? Those are all things to consider. I do recommend going through the page that this chart comes from. You could look at some of these resources. They do have some good things on research papers. So again, you're looking at the types of questions that you're asking, and then it's got a couple more steps. So this is something you want to take the time to look into. Just different things that you can consider. So I'd encourage you to take a few moments to do that. You do have the link to these slides, and I'll make sure that this link is also in the module. So these are some examples of questions that I actually got from the guide that I just showed you. So when do states adjust their economic policies in response to economic downturns? And how do domestic struggles for power affect nuclear proliferation agendas? These are two different questions. I just sort of pulled some examples. What I like to do, first of all, when you have a research topic, go ahead and put it in the form of a question like these are. That way you are being a little bit more specific about what it is you're after. You're not just saying, I'm interested in nuclear proliferation. Well, what about it? Tell me more. You're being more specific. What I do then is I will either underline or highlight what I consider to be the most important terms or the key words in a sentence. These are later going to become search terms that we can use, so this is definitely an important step. Here's another example that I've done before. What influence does China have over Nigeria in terms of oil issues? So I identified China, Nigeria, and oil as the most important words. This is one that we'll work with a little bit more. So what has been the international community's response to piracy off the coast of Somalia? Um, I went through and highlighted international community, piracy, and Somalia. So what I would then encourage you to do is to make a list of these words and write out either synonyms or related terms next to them. There could also be alternative spellings of words that you want to consider as you're searching. So I'll give you a minute to think about what some potential words related to these highlighted terms might be. Just take 10 seconds or so. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Another thing that might be useful here before I show you the words that I came up with, consider that Somalia is just one country in Africa, right? You have many other countries that are located on the eastern side of Africa. You could consider searching East Africa as a region. You could consider searching the names of countries that border Somalia, or if you know of other countries that have dealt with piracy issues, those could certainly be terms that you could try searching for as well. So don't limit yourself necessarily to this one term. So here's what I came up with. With international community, I said global community. I also said world leaders. Another thing you might say would be perhaps you could think about international governance bodies. So the United Nations, for instance. Piracy, I just came up with pirates. Somalia, you could say Somalian. You could also say African. You could also say East African. As we were looking at on that map earlier, you could try a couple names of countries. So take the time to actually write out some related terms when you have a topic in mind, because it can save you some time later, as we'll see. I really want to kind of quickly touch on finding and evaluating sources, not just websites, but all types of sources. So I highly recommend the ABCD framework. This is a really good way to evaluate sources. The link is in the slides that you're going to have access to, but I'll also drop it separately in the module. So we go to a chart that looks like this. A stands for authority. So how do I know that this person knows what they're talking about? How do I know that they have authority on the subject? What makes them credible? So you need some sort of qualification. So having experience as a journalist, maybe you have a degree in that particular subject, holding public office, or being there when a historic event happens. Those are all different ways of becoming an authority on a topic. There are other ways as well. Please, when you are trying to evaluate someone's authority, take the time to look outside of the source itself. Look at other things to see if you can verify this person's credentials and experience. Bias. Bias can be tricky because everybody has a bias. Think about the purpose of a source. Are they trying to persuade you of something? Are they trying to sell you something? This one's really important. Does the author acknowledge that multiple perspectives may exist on their topic? We do want things that can acknowledge that their way is not the only way, but perhaps back it up with some evidence and make the argument as to why they believe that they're right. So I'm not telling you that any bias sources can't be used, right? I'm telling you that you should try to balance the bias out. Currency, how recently was something published, or when was it published? When was it last updated? This is an important one. Be careful with currency because some people will say, oh, this source is, older than 10 years old, so I can't use it. That's not necessarily the case. If you're doing historical research, older resources might be fantastic. There are also times where the newest information is not going to be as useful. So if you're not sure about currency, I would highly suggest talking to Dr. Broche. As a subject expert in these topics, he could help you decide what a good date range to search on a particular issue might be. If you cannot find the date on a source, I would encourage you not to use it. And documentation is really important. When you are looking at an information source, see if you can tell where they got the information from. I don't want to see resources that are just sort of citing themselves or linking to, if it's a website, if it's linking to other pages on the same website and that's it, that's sometimes a problem. See if a publication has gone through any sort of fact checking or any sort of peer review. Um, it should be pretty obvious when you're looking at a scholarly source whether or not it has been peer reviewed. We'll talk more about what peer review means. Not every source that you use needs to be peer reviewed, but it's important to understand what it is and how it works. So we'll talk more about that. Obviously, if you're not sure, please ask Dr. Broche or myself for help. You're going to have to watch a video after this on lateral reading, which is a really important process. So please watch that video, pay close attention. It's underneath this video. It is basically this process of evaluating a source by comparing it to other sources. So if I am on a website and I'm reading an article, for instance, lateral reading would involve me opening new tabs and going to different websites to try and verify the information or try to verify what I'm being presented with on that particular website. We are going to go over your library guide for this course in a different video, so be ready for that. This is definitely a link that you are going to want to bookmark and make note of. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to write that down. You can also go ahead and end this video if you've already got it written down.